Now more than ever, you see Christians talking about how worldly the world is, without realizing that they themselves actually are a part of this quote unquote world in many ways. Now, this is a very controversial statement, but I don't really care because it's true, and that's all I really care about. Now, with that being said, in this video, I want to make two primary points, and then I want to get into takeaways you can have from this video. But first, I must make an example. Alright, they always talk about the world, right? And the world I take to mean as anti-Christian doctrines, the people that have strayed away from God. Okay? Now, we understand that there's a concerted effort against Christianity in culture, right? Because being a Christian now is essentially very taboo. Okay? Because you ask the average person, maybe they say Christians are okay, but once you start saying Christian things, they start having a problem with it, right? So I want you to think about a big soup. There's been a big soup made that is anti-Christianity, okay? And the world, in this context, is essentially just gobbling it up. It's like a chug jugging Fortnite. They're just drinking it all, as much as they can. They're like on life support from the soup. But I want you to see, what I see is that, unknowingly, because I think most Christians who talk about the world have good intentions, but in their actions, what they do, maybe not morally, but in terms of just what they do, they're the soup, Jesus, Christianity, Jesus, 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 Jesus. They're drinking from the same soup as the world, but they don't realize it in more cases than not. So I want to go over 2 points I see a lot in Christian circles today that I want to address. First will be regarding something that the government has literally funded. Okay, I'm hoping I have the sources here. Shouldn't forget. The government has funded liberal egalitarian ideas, and the offshoots of these things is stuff like feminism and the crippling crisis of masculinity. The government has funded all of this. Sources are here. And the first section I want to get into is about masculinity. Okay, I want you to think about most churches you've gone into, because I've gone into quite a few churches myself. Most of them, actually all of them, were Protestant, mostly non-denominational, so I think, generally speaking, Catholic and Orthodox don't necessarily have this problem, but this is like a big problem in Protestant spaces. Whenever I go to church, all the men are like soy jacks. You know how like the soy jack has like a flannel shirt or some kind of somewhat preppy shirt, but it's worn a little geeky, and then, they're like, hey, how you doing? Yeah, ha 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 ha. Right? It's a very overtly like happy, nice demeanor. And you may think, oh, well, what's wrong with being nice and happy? I'm not saying there's something wrong with it, but I'm saying there's something wrong with being a man and just having this very flamboyant, bombastic kind of personality where you're just kind of too happy. Okay, and I think women especially will understand what I'm saying, because I hear women talk about all the time how they don't want a guy that's, when they get really honest, they don't want a guy that's too nice. They want a guy that's a little bit mean. Why? Because being mean is actually the more masculine demeanor. I don't mean like being overtly like very rude or mean, but I'm saying just kind of not being overly friendly. You still say hi, still give a little smile, handshake, etc. But you aren't like, it's very weird. And this is actually something that is very new in culture. That people act like this, men have been like this for all time. If you look at hunter-gatherer days, men were very, they were very straight up, very poised. And you see this in culture, especially Christian culture, for a very long time. Men are acting very, stoic, right? It's not that they never get happy and never smile, but at the same time, they're not like, if anyone acted like that, let's say 50 years ago, you're like, well, that guy probably putts from the rough. He probably likes certain things in certain places. You would assume these type of things, but now, if you go to Christian spaces, it seems very normal, like this super overly positive attitude. And I want you to understand that this is this is partly hormonal, but it's also due to the complete destruction of masculine identity. Okay, and I want you to understand masculine identity is actually an offshoot of Christian culture. Okay, masculine identity is a part of Christianity because, I mean, just read the Bible. The Bible, and this will be relevant later when I talk about women and gender roles and whatnot. Women who are Christian, who claim feminism, their biggest problem is the Bible. Because the Bible is one of the most chauvinistic books I've ever read. And I take chauvinistic to mean, kind of machismo, macho, etc. And not in the sense of talks like, well, you're going to have big muscles and whatever. I'm talking more in the sense of, well, it's patriarchal. It's male ruled. And I can give you 3 examples. I can give you the example from Genesis where God tells Eve, your husband will rule over you. I could give you the example from, what was it? It was I just had it. I'll move on to the other example. In Timothy, Paul literally says that, women can't teach in the church. That's what Paul wrote to Timothy and to the church in Titus. In Corinthians, it also says that women have to be silent in the churches. They argue that's because, they were spreading, one pastor who has female pastors, talk more about that later, was telling me that, and I don't really consider myself a Protestant anymore, it's kind of old, but was telling me that, well, the Bible, it only says that because, the woman in Corinth were spreading misinformation. Maybe that has to do with Adam and Eve and, what Eve did, because Satan targeted Eve, right? And Paul literally references in his letter to Timothy where he says, well, they can't because women transgressed. Women were deceived in the first place, right? And the other thing I was thinking about earlier that I've forgotten was, in Isaiah, rhetorically speaking, just looking at the sentence structure, it essentially alludes that a nation led by women is cursed. I mean, you could read the verse. I'm putting them all here. And you may not like these things. You may not like how they sound. But that is what it says. And the point is that the Bible speaks in this way of, male patriarchy, male rule. Now, it doesn't mean men are supposed to be mean and, bad people and, just enslave everyone. Like, I wonder if YouTube's going to ban me for doing that. No? It's a joke. It's not hate speech. Okay? Anyways. But that's how they take it when you say, like, patriarchy and kind of like this machismo ideas. Like, you're supposed to be like a tyrant that doesn't care anyone. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying very precisely is that men are supposed to lead things, and men are supposed to be like the rock. They're supposed to be the foundation for women and society. And you can't be a strong foundation when you're like, ah. And I see this so much in Christian spaces. Overly happy, soy face all over the place. Okay? So, it's very important to have a masculine disposition. And also, men just aren't expected to do the things that they were once expected to do, culturally. In terms of when the rubber meets the road, the tire hits the road, whatever the saying is, men are expected to be men, right? When things start going wrong, they're always going to look to you as a man. But in normative discourse, it's no longer about being a man anymore. So, there's no social stigma around being dumb. I mean, most men are dumb now, and no one really cares that much. There's no stigma around being weak physically. There's no stigma around, not having ambitions financially, etc. They don't really care about this anymore. It's not an expectation of man. And again, I mean, you could say that what I'm saying is like, oh, new, like, Sigma, alpha male speak. I don't really align myself with any of those quote-unquote traditions because, I mean, the Bible talks about this. The Bible talks about being a provider, being a protector, being intelligent. I mean, that's what I just talked about, right? So, there's a big problem with Christian men and not having this masculine identity. And that correlates exactly with women. I think it's not women's fault. It's men's fault because men are supposed to teach women. But women were targeted first and foremost before men, which created this cultural problem. And like I said, I already showed us screenshots of the feminist movement being funded. And the point is that this is from a Marxist playbook, okay? And if you don't know what Marxism is, it's Karl Marx. He's the guy who wrote the Communist Manifesto. And basically, I want to keep this very brief. I don't want to make this too esoteric, so to speak, but essentially, people in charge run the Marxist playbook to divide and conquer the people that they rule over. So, in the book, and I'll show some quotes on the screen, hopefully, it talks a lot about how it wants to destroy the nuclear family. It wants to destroy religion. And to get back to the soup example earlier, if you're a Christian, and if you are following along with these ideas that have been propagated in media, like if you're hearing what I'm saying right now and you're like, uh, I don't like that. Like, I mean, if you're a man and you're disagreeing with me, you're like, you got to be like that, okay? Like if you're a man and you've disagreed with what I said so far, you're a homosexual. Anyways, so the Marxist playbook is essentially to divide the people based on class and race and gender. And what we see now is, in the same way Satan targeted Eve, they mainly targeted women with feminism. Okay, like I've seen Christian women go like, well, girl power. I don't need a man. I don't need a man. But the Bible is completely against the first premise of feminism. You know, they have like the woman with the sleeve rolled up with the muscle. Like, I don't need a man. I can do things on my own. It's like, well, guess what? God told Eve, your husband will rule over you. So I mean, that's pretty difficult to deal with, reconcile. It says that women are saved by childbirth. This is a bit metaphorical, obviously, but you need a man to give birth, don't you? You can't get pregnant on your own. Water break. And it says a bunch of other things which completely go against basic core feminist ideas. Yet, because of this soup that everyone's drinking out of, you see Christian women taking a bunch of these feminist ideas. Like, I remember I was again, I'm not really a Protestant anymore, but I remember I went to a non-denominational church one time and they had female pastors there. Literally says you can't do that in the Bible, but they still have it. You can argue whether or not Protestants even follow a proper church structure. I think that's especially non-denominationals, like the typical ones with like rock bands and stuff. I think that's a very good point to make. But in any case, women will literally go like, I have to submit to my husband. Like, there's something, it's like they drink from the soup and are like, I don't really like how it tastes. I don't like how Christianity tastes. I like this other soup. Like, female empowerment or whatever. That's because they bought into a scam. And the reason why they bought into a scam is because women essentially listen to whoever their authority is. Right? Whoever has authority over the woman, they listen to and they will propagate the ideas of. And now, because of men getting weaker, they're not, again, this is not women's fault. I think this is men's fault. Because men are weak now, like that, they're like, well, I don't really want to listen to this because this doesn't really get it done for me. I don't like this. Fair enough. If I was a woman, I would say the same exact thing. But then they're like, well, the government, I guess this is my authority. And the government tells them what? Or TikTok or Instagram, which are, government-controlled algorithms. Feminism. Yay. So, the solution, and these are not the takeaways yet. I think that I'll make the takeaways after my second point. But the takeaway, supporting takeaway, that'll help build up my case for later, for the main takeaways, is that you need to affirm a more patriarchal gender role. You need to say, it's not just, oh, well, I feel like this, I feel like that, I feel like this. No. I'm a man. It's my duty to act like a man, and women have to act like women. If they call me a misogynist or any other things, oh well. I'm telling the truth. Now, the second point I want to make, and this is more of a minor point, I'll probably get through this more quickly, but it's kind of this new revolution in Christianity. And it's not new in the sense of, I'll just leak it a little bit, charismatic ideas. That's not necessarily super new. But what is new is this abandoning of the New Age, like law of attraction, manifestation, all this other stuff, in favor of like evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal ideas. And you may think on the surface, like, oh, are you defending New Age? Well, I don't defend New Age doctrine as a whole. Obviously, as a Christian, it contradicts a lot of the stuff that it says. But the thing is, these people who move away from New Age and then become like evangelical Pentecostals say like, oh, well, today, God made me, like, God made me go to Publix and I met this person who was so amazing. Like, God made me do that. Like, God worked through me. Those other stuff. And on the surface, that seems like a very, good-hearted thing to say. It seems like a very, wow, that's such an experience thing. But when you understand the intellectual side of Christianity, you start understanding that this idea doesn't work. Because the whole point of the Christian worldview is that humans are moral agents. And via our own moral agency or free will, we have destroyed this world that God has given us. That's why there's all the evil and suffering in it. Now, I'm of the contention that the world has a lot more good in it than bad. That's the way I view it. But at the same time, there is a lot of evil and suffering, and that is because of humans. So, when you start understanding, like, oh, well, God did this through me, God did that, God told me this, you're kind of taking away your own agency, right? Because now it's like, well, now you're like a puppet and you're a marionette, and you're just like being, okay, well, now I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that. Well, God, I'm not doing it, God's doing it for me. And here's the thing, and this is why I brought up New Age. I'll use Neville Goddard, because Neville Goddard's like the biggest New Age person. I would say he's like the founder of this law of attraction, manifestation idea in terms of what we understand it to be now. And what he says basically is that you must change your thoughts and your feelings to be in the end desired state in order to get what you want. And that principle in of itself is actually very aligned with Christianity, because God said, God, says himself in the Bible that, well, if you believe that it has been done, it will be done. Right? And it's not exactly what it's like a paraphrase, but the point is that if you live in the end, you will receive the end. Right? That's faith, that's belief. So Neville Goddard's correct in that regard. However, the part where he strays away is that he says that I am, the subconscious, is God. And it's kind of this idea of the collective, the collective will of humanity is God. That's obviously antagonistic to what Christianity teaches, because Christianity teaches a transcendent God that is not a human. He became a human at one point, but in his divine nature, he's not a human, right? So that's the problem we would have with it. But we would actually agree, you should agree, with the first premise I brought up, which is the thoughts and feelings change it to be in the end. But the thing is, when these people say, like, oh, these things happen in my life, these things change so well because I followed it, and God worked through me, and God told me this, God told me that. What they're doing is they're confusing their subconscious with God. So if you're very astute, you would realize that they're actually doing the same thing that, let's say, Neville Goddard is doing. Identifying the subconscious with God. Now, obviously, I don't see this as them doing that on purpose, right? I wouldn't call it like a morally reprehensible thing, because morals, I think, ultimately are about the intention of the action. But at the end of the day, they have the same exact philosophy. So you may wonder, me, someone who just agreed with something Neville Goddard said, but then disagrees with the other part, but then says Christians who say it's God working through them in that sense are also wrong. What do I say? What I say is very simple. In the same way, your decision to do evil is your decision, and it is wrong. Your decision to do something good is your decision. It's very simple. Now, how does this align with, the Bible talking about God's will and all these different things? When the Bible speaks of God's will, there's multiple different forms. So there's God's will in terms of what he declares. So that's like the universe. He declared the universe to exist, so it happened. But then there's also his moral will, in that what he desires to happen. And humans have obviously have not followed that will for a very long time, but there are situations when you do something good, you are aligned with God's good will, like his moral will. So what I'm saying is that you have to align yourself, your own mind, with that will. And that comes from understanding what's right and understanding yourself, ultimately. And I will get into my key takeaways from this video. But you have to understand, it's not that God treats you like a puppet and you do it. What happens is that you align yourself to this will that God has for you to do good. And then from there, you'll naturally start doing good because you've aligned your subconscious to God. So realize your subconscious is not God, but rather your subconscious, which you condition, which I think Neville Goddard is right about, and you change your thoughts and your feelings, because the subconscious is far more powerful than the conscious. You transform this to align more with God's will. And then therefore, your actions will more so align it. So that's like a minor point. That's another way they drink from the same New Age soup, because it's kind of a ridiculous notion. Because remember, if God tells you something, you are morally obligated to do it. And the thing is, like, humans are fallible. Okay, we're not prophets. I'm sure even most of the people that admit this would say they're not a prophet. And humans are fallible. So when we say, well, God told me this, you can't know that. Okay? Because by way of being a human, you can never be 100% correct. Right? So, because of that, they're essentially attributing themselves infallibility, which is wrong. And again, this goes back to the thing I was saying. They're essentially making the same mistake New Agers make when they say they themselves are God. Now, that being said, what are the takeaways for this video? What am I going to tell you guys to do? First and foremost, become educated. This is mainly for men. If women are, I mean, I understand how a woman could get onto this video by seeing my face, but... But on a serious note, if you're a man, become educated, join my Discord. I'm actually open right now to questions. Like, literally, just go into the Discord, type up a question, I'll answer it. But in terms of, it's learning stuff and then transforming your life, transforming your mind, transforming your body. And this is ultimately what comes from something I call Silu, which are 4 stages of transformation. And it all starts with self-awareness. So for a lot of you guys, this is what I'm going to let you do. Okay? And I also recommend you join the Discord and check out the other videos. I'll talk more about the other stuff. And I also have a 3-hour, like 4 or 5 hour video planned for the mind. But the first step is very simple. Don't change anything, but become observant. Everything you do, look at it under a microscope. Don't change it. Don't change the way you think. Don't go like, oh, well, I shouldn't think that. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do that. No. Let yourself do whatever you want, but observe it. Because I want you to understand. Let's take porn as a very good example. A lot of people will say at the very start, quit porn, quit porn, quit porn. And you should quit porn. However, I want you to think about porn addiction. It's more than just liking titties. Okay? It's more than liking nutting on yourself. Okay? It's what it is. It's you trying to fill a void deep down. Right? So, the problem is that when it's like, you know those in the movies have a little puppy? But because of the lighting angle, it casts this huge shadow which makes it look like a big monster. That's exactly what porn is. But here's the thing. That makes it an illusion. And how do you figure out an illusion? You have to look at it. You have to pay attention to it. So what happens when you immediately say, well, I'm just going to quit porn. I'm going to quit porn now, and you just run? You don't have enough time to see the illusion. You understand? So what I'm saying is that become very observant with everything in your life. And eventually, just by being observant, just looking at every little thing, every little thought, all the things you do, being aware, you start seeing the illusions in your life. And then it's like, oh, well, first of all, you get disgusted with yourself. That's a natural thing to do. But then you also go like, I actually don't enjoy anything I do. And then that'll naturally get the ball rolling for your transformation. Again, there's a lot more to it than that. Again, I'll join the Discord. I have a channel full of stuff that I can't put on YouTube. Great information. Talk about a bunch of different subjects. Gym, philosophy, psychology, food, etc. Money, business. I run a business. So I would check all that out. Check out the other videos. Subscribe. All that great stuff. Never forget the things I said in this video because they're very important. I touched on a lot of very important social issues because remember, the nuclear family, the family is what teaches the next generation their values. If that is destroyed, we're destroyed. See you next one.